Hello everyone. Right away I want to thank you for coming back to my channel for another video. Today we are once again talking about a commonplace book, specifically how to create and keep a commonplace book, which is something that I think has helped me personally improve my learning, and it's for that reason that I want to share it with you. So right away I'll ask the same age-old question that I always ask, which I know the algorithm is just dying for me to get to, which is, why do I think this video is worth your time? Maybe as corny as it might sound, I want to help you actualize your full potential and achieve your goals. And I think many young people are done a serious disservice by not being taught about the benefits that keeping a commonplace book or even just a journal can offer. So that's what today's video is all about, how to create and keep a commonplace book. So in the past, I've made a few videos about what a commonplace book is and why I think creating a commonplace book is something that I recommend to most of my students. But in today's video, we're kind of past the what and the why. I think everyone should keep a commonplace book, and I'll be outlining a couple of strategies that I use myself. I hope you find this video helpful because, like I mentioned before, I really want to help you get closer to achieving your goals and actualizing your full potential. And I think a commonplace book is a great place to start. Okay, so let's get into it. I teach a reading and writing intensive undergraduate course at Johns Hopkins, so I'll tell you what I tell my students. Creating a commonplace book, it's not inherently difficult or anything like that. And as a side note, I'll say that I'm making this video assuming that you already know what a commonplace book is, but in the event that you don't know, like I've already said, I've talked about it in other videos and the links are in the description. So anyways, what makes it challenging is this: any kind of writing is time consuming, and maintaining a time consuming habit is tough. It's way easier to just not write down the interesting bits of information that you encounter throughout the day. The famous English writer Virginia Woolf once said, "Let us take down one of those old notebooks which we have all at one time or another had a passion for beginning. Most of the pages are blank, it is true, but at the beginning we shall find a certain number very beautifully covered with a strikingly legible handwriting." Okay, so why do I include this quote? I include it because for those that are familiar with her work, Virginia Woolf is a heavy hitter. We're talking, Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, A Room of One's Own, Orlando. She's a great writer, one of the best of the 20th century, and as it turns out, even, Virginia Woolf found that keeping a commonplace book is a bit difficult at times. And I want to communicate this idea as clearly as possible, that creating a commonplace book isn't inherently difficult. It's maintaining, that initial creation of a commonplace book that's difficult. And it was even difficult for, a literary genius like Virginia Woolf. Hopefully this makes you a little less intimidated by the idea of creating a commonplace book. But now that we've kind of established that maintaining a commonplace book isn't the easiest thing in the world, let's get to kind of the meat of it. So how can we create a commonplace book? So I really recommend setting aside time for both reading and writing in the book itself. Interestingly enough, this first strategy kind of deals with the act of creating a commonplace book indirectly. The value of creating a commonplace book is that you create what is essentially a work of art that's tailored to your own unique interests. And I think that's a really unique thing. So when we create a commonplace book, it's the kind of thing that's going to take, weeks, if not months or years to piece together. My experience has been that the best way to make sure my commonplace book doesn't go the route of those that Virginia Woolf described is to set aside some time every day, usually the same chunk of time in the morning and at night, to reread old material and to write new material in my commonplace book. Speaking from experience, rereading what you've written in a commonplace book is almost as important, I think, as keeping up on writing a little bit in it every day. I think about rereading as just re-exposure. One of the points of keeping a commonplace book is, like I've already said, to help us achieve some sort of deeper learning faster. And that unfortunately requires a lot of effort. It's not easy. Now, I've gone back and forth on how to structure the time I spend writing in my commonplace book. I've tried doing it as I read a book or watch a YouTube video or a TV show or whatever. Basically what I'm saying is that in the past I've tried writing in my commonplace book in real time, which is to say that as I'm learning, I've got, my commonplace book open next to me and I'm just waiting for something interesting to jump out at me. But that isn't what I do anymore. And the reason I don't do it is because one of two things always happened when I took this approach to writing in my Commonplace book. I either didn't write anything down at all because I would get kind of so into the book I was reading or the show I was watching or whatever piece of media I was consuming that I wouldn't end up writing anything down. Or I would be kind of so engrossed by what I was spending time with and so focused on writing down every bit of information that interested me that I would move through whatever was in front of me at basically a snail's pace. I can understand why it might be valuable, but to me it seemed almost counterproductive in a way to be moving that slowly. The pace, even though it was slow instead of fast, that slow pace wasn't sustainable. It just was something I decided against. So this is where I'm at right now. I'll sit down with a book, for example. Right now I'm rereading Crime and Punishment for a podcast I'm doing with a friend in the future. So I make notes in the margins when I find something that I think is worth remembering or worth returning to, or when something strikes me as being kind of applicable to some larger learning goal that I've set for myself. I make tiny notes in the margins, little notes with only a couple words, and I just keep moving through the text. I try not to pull myself out of what it is that actually has my attention too much. And my thinking is that, and I've said this before in other videos, that our attention is like a muscle, and the more we switch back and forth between activities, the more we, let's say, prematurely exhaust our attention for the day. Okay, so that all being said, how exactly do I keep a Commonplace book? I like to write my Commonplace book for a couple of minutes before I go to bed at night, even if it's only for 10, 15, or 20 minutes. And I try to rely on my memory as much as I possibly can. I'll occasionally go directly back to the source if I remember something interesting but can't really recall what it was. But for the most part, I try relying on my memory whenever I can. My rationale is that when we rely on our memories, the ideas that we're interested in are texturized by our subconscious in a way that they wouldn't necessarily be if we just copied them straight from the book. I think that if we allow some time to pass, we're kind of naturally filtering for those ideas that interest us most, which is to say that what's still in our heads, a few hours after we expose ourselves to it is likely important enough to justify writing down, to justify taking a place in our Commonplace book. So that's kind of my process for keeping a Commonplace book. I'll probably talk more about my process in some future video, but I just wanted to close this video out by briefly mentioning that I also like to spend 15 or 20 minutes rereading what I previously wrote in my Commonplace book. I like to do this in the mornings. I'll sit down with my Commonplace book and kind of comb through a couple of pages of what I wrote the night before, and more generally just whatever was previously written, trying to kind of keep myself familiar with everything that has been written down. I think it's important that we always remember that the purpose of a Commonplace book is to help facilitate deeper learning. It's to make us into better people. Deeper learning and becoming a better person requires the incorporation of new information that we filter for personal interests, like I've already said, as well as the review and study of older information. And I think it's this communication of past interests and present interests that, at least in my opinion, puts us in a better position to optimize the time that we spend learning. And I think that can help us, position ourselves a step or two closer to achieving the goals that we set for ourselves and actualizing our full potential. And again, that's what I want. It's what I want for myself, and it's what I want for you. But okay, that's everything I've got. Before I go, I want to thank you, my wonderful viewer, for sticking with me to the end. If you found this video interesting or useful or helpful, I ask that you please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I would love to talk about some of this stuff with you. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.